So this is a public hearing, or special public hearing notice. And this is regarding the proposed changes to the zoning regulations relative to flood and fluvial erosion hazard regulations. And this is from Wyndham Regional Commission this year. And I imagine people from...
We can introduce ourselves.
Yeah, why doesn't everyone introduce themselves while they're here? So,
Lonnie, do you want to start?
Lonnie Wharton, Conservation Commission, Putney.
Ann Carey, Conservation Commission.
Tom Nelson, Putney resident. I live on Putney Brook.
okay.
And Steve Lemke, floodplain administrator for the town of Guilford.
Alyssa Sabetta, planner with the Wyndham Regional Commission, and I worked with the Planning Commission, the Putney Planning Commission, on putting together these regs.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure where to begin, actually, except we're, I guess, more or less waiting for more public comment. We don't have a whole lot of public here.
So we did have our first public hearing on July 10th,
Right.
and there was approximately 40 people at the firehouse. There were a lot of questions, and they were provided with answers. I know one resident did a site visit with John. Was it
Okay.
John? Yeah, the state rep. He went right to the site. I was there too.
Okay.
So I think it's clear that if anyone has questions about their property, whether it being in the flood hazard area, that a site visit can be done ahead of time if they're planning on developing the property.
Definitely, yeah.
Yes.
It's encouraged.
It is, yeah. So these regulations don't stop anyone, but you're not limited. You may be restricted to a certain point, but building, you can build like 2 or 3 feet above elevation. So when you're building something new, there are certain things that you might have to abide by.
Or if you're doing an improvement to your home,
Mm-hmm.
particularly if you're putting an addition on, that's a substantial improvement, then where you site that, and if you're in the special flood hazard area, which is the FEMA zone, you would need to elevate the
Right.
lowest floor of that. But if you're in the river corridor, you might be asked to consider, siting your addition on, like the downward, farther away from the river side of your house versus closer to the river, depending on how far away you are, that kind of thing. So it's a good idea to encourage residents to talk early with your zoning administrator, with A&R if necessary.
Pre-planning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a couple people have asked me, regarding the existing structures that might be within that. How is that dealt with?
There's no changes required to existing structures. This would just be for structures that start of construction begins after this would be adopted.
I actually chatted with Karen before this, and she answered my questions.
Okay.
Does anyone have anything to add?
Well, the Conservation Commission, for the record, did vote to support these regulations. We think they're a good step toward more flood resiliency in the town. And also helping people not get, keeping themselves and their property out of harm's way. Which, given the storm that's rolling in right now, it's just our whole climate is changing, the degree of severity of our storms is going to get worse and worse, so I think this is a very good thing to do.
Right, and another thing that someone brought up that I was trying to explain, and I'm sure you could, articulate it better than I can, but people who are concerned about, why are they restricting what I'm doing, if I want to do it. And one of the things that you mentioned at that last meeting was it's not just to protect you, but the other houses downstream, if your shed were to wash it out and take out someone's
Yep.
And so that's part of the reasoning behind this, right?
Yes, yeah, I
Mhm.
mean, the whole intention of the bylaw is to, over a period of time, you're going to, as new development comes and, you know, things are changed and replaced or whatnot, that you are having less vulnerability going forward. So you're just putting yourself in a position that future development is less vulnerable. So over time, ideally, then you no longer have vulnerable development, or you know, it's made less vulnerable over time. And yeah, I mean, I should say that we worked for well over a year on developing these regulations. The Putney Planning Commission was amazing, and too.
I agree with that. The planning commission did
Yeah, it was.
hours and hours
It was.
trying to wade through
It
all
was
the
really
details.
unprecedented. I've worked on a lot of bylaw updates here and elsewhere, and I've never worked so closely with the planning commission. We went through everything, and Pip was great about, you know, bringing forward scenarios and running through them. And you know, we made alterations and customizations to the model. We changed our model based on, you know, good input that we got from the planning commission members. It was impressive, very impressive. And I think what you have here is a really good document that
Solid,
will
yeah.
serve the town well.
Thank you.
So I guess in a way, this does tie in with the FEMA mitigation plans that we adopted a couple years ago, then, right?
Yeah, it was a mitigation action in your plan to update your flood hazard bylaw to include river corridors. So this does that. This additionally would bring your ERAF rate, your Emergency Relief Assistance Fund rate, from 12.5% to 17.5%. So after any FEMA declaration, you would be getting a 17.5% match from the state. FEMA gives 75, they would give 17.5% with this reg. If you didn't, your current reg gives you 12.5% because it doesn't include river corridors, but you still have a reg and you're still a member of the National Flood Insurance Program. But that would increase what the state gives, so you would be responsible for only 7.5% of your public damages to, you know, that you would be applying for.
That's a big number.
That's huge.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which can be quite sizable depending on the
Yes.
event.
Yeah.
I mean, this does, I should say too, that, you know, the impact of this for your zoning administrator, it does put a number of more structures into needing to get a floodplain permit than by having the river corridors included versus just your special flood hazard area as it is now. So it is, you know, more burdensome for your zoning administrator to have to carry out the duties versus your current regs. But, you know, we're here to support you,
Yeah.
John Burke Campbell, A&R, and others at A&R support zoning administrators statewide. It's not something that she would be alone on, but, you know,
Right.
if we go ahead with this, I would definitely want to sit down with you and make sure you're comfortable. I have documents that I can give as far as like templates that we can customize for Putney for applications and notices and that kind of thing to assist with
Okay.
the work. But you may already have that too, so
I don't yet, but we can talk.
yeah.
So,
So are you okay with it?
I don't know. I think we need a part-time zoning administrator. I'm kidding. I mean, basically, it's new development and/or additions in those areas. So it's not a huge number. So, and we just take one at a time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and you'd want to make sure that people are aware that they would need to get permits too.
Right.
That's a big
Right.
thing, is sometimes people don't know.
Yeah. But I'll work with A&R, and when I was in Westminster, we would have to do that for properties in flood hazard areas, so, and they're really responsive, so.
Yeah. Yeah, you would send any permit application up to A&R for comment too, so that's
Yeah.
part of the process
Right.
to get their way in on applications too.
Yeah,
Except for like administrative stuff, that's pretty simple.
right. But they may make recommendations on how it should be built, like you
Mhm.
said, how high and what type of material.
Yeah.
So depending on what they're doing, but I don't see a big impact unless somebody wants to build right in a flood hazard, you know, like in the middle of the field that we know is gonna flood. You know, that's something that would be reviewed.
Yes, yeah.
But I mean, looking at the map, there's
So, yeah.
areas.
All of the orange areas and the green areas would be new. All of the pink areas are currently under your
Right,
FEMA regs.
yeah.
So,
Does Putney have building permits? If somebody wants to build a new structure, do you require a building permit?
We require a zoning application.
So you're aware, if somebody wants to build something, you have a process in place
Yes,
that alerts you to the fact that somebody's planning to build.
yes, yep. And our fire chief too is very active with building codes, especially for multifamily homes and commercial. So I use Tom as a resource as well.
that's one. Yeah.
Yeah. But any new development, any additions, a deck, anything like that, people have to come to the town for an application. Anything 100 square feet or more triggers an application.
Well, so like even a deck, if you're putting a deck closer, you know, that would
Yeah,
affect
yes.
FEMA and
Yeah.
the recorder stuff.
Yeah. It's all good.
Well, I don't know where to go from here. I mean, it sounds good to me too. I mean, it sounds, you know, pretty prudent. And especially, I mean, we haven't seen it here necessarily, but, you know, things that we're seeing in North and South Carolina and things that have happened there here in the past with Irene, et cetera.
Right.
I don't think it's going to get any better anytime soon.
No.
Does anyone have anything else to add?
So Alyssa, our next step is to wait for comment
Okay.
and then approve it.
Oh, are you asking?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, however, how do you typically adopt ordinances? I mean, do you do a vote? Could you vote right now for it and adopt it now, or do you have?
It's 60 days, right? that it has-
Unless we have any other waiting period,
Right,
which I don't think we do, right?
I think we've done that.
Exactly. I think
Right.
this is the,
Just,
if we get comments for revisions,
Mhm.
then we would have to wait and then you could approve it after the changes, but we'd have to do the planning commission, right? It would have to go back to the planning commission?
to change an ordinance, you're saying? Or
No, to change or revise the way this
do we have any need to do that?
reads. I don't think so,
No, I mean, we haven't, there haven't, because we've been in the
Right,
waiting period
right.
while we were waiting for comment.
Yeah,
And there haven't been any comments, is that
Right.
correct?
right. I think there's a few, Ann, you made a few comments and they were changed.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And
That was previous to the last public meeting, I think even, wasn't it?
That was after.
that was after the last,
Was it?
and before this one,
Yes,
that they were incorporated.
yeah.
Now, would this be the same as when we allowed 6-unit buildings, you know, when there was an amendment to the bylaws, or is this a totally bigger thing to have holding regs? Because with that one, I think there was a hearing, and then the hearing was closed, and then the board took an action on the proposal. This is why we need Pip here.
Right, right.
I mean, we can certainly table it till our next meeting if we need to do that in order to,
Well,
unless there's any question, unless you're clear. I mean,
I'm not clear.
I was under the impression this was the final,
Yes,
the
this is
closing
the-
of this.
yeah, yes, that was my impression as well, is that the the planning commission had a hearing, and then we waited for comment, now the select board has a hearing. I believe you can adopt it. It says here that you can, a bylaw shall be adopted by a majority of the members of the legislative body at a meeting that is held after the final public hearing, and shall be effective 21 days after adoption unless by action of the legislative body the bylaw is warned for adoption by a municipality by Australian ballot at a special or regular meeting. So I think that you can adopt it with it being effective 21 days from now at this point.
Is the public hearing supposed to be closed in some kind of formal way, or does it say that?
I don't think so.
I think it did.
We would close the public hearing and then vote on it in a regular meeting.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Okay, I see. Yeah.
In enactment, it says this bylaw shall be effective 60 days after the below adoption date and shall remain in force until modified, amended, or rescinded by the town of Putney.
That's what I thought was 60 days for,
That's right, in our document here from, is this from you guys? This is Wyndham Regional
Yeah, so.
Model Flood Hazard Regulation.
I'm trying to think if that has to do with, I don't know, I haven't dealt with an actual adoption in Vermont ever, so.
Any suggestion?
I was just asked if I have a suggestion. I think this is just one man's opinion, but if I were you, I would schedule the adoption at your next regular schedule.
That's what I'm thinking, maybe we
Because
table it.
allowing some digestion of
Right.
public comment for somebody who's desperately trying to get here tonight but can't, and then, so then you could take that, wait your 2 weeks or whatever, adopt it, and then it goes, I think you can set an effective date at the bottom that says
Right.
this shall go into
Yeah.
effect
Yeah.
at a certain point. So you can choose a date or it will automatically go into effect. I think 60 days to have it.
There's Pip. Yeah, no, you're good. 5 o'clock. I was waiting to. We're just debating whether,
It's fine. But we have a question for you, came with an interest.
are we supposed to adopt this tonight? Or is there any more waiting period?
Sorry, I was under the impression that I was early.
Well, the usual select board meetings are at 5:30, aren't they? Yeah.
Yes.
I'll read what the state law, where we are in this process.
We were just saying, we've now had the public hearing, so we could wait to table it till our next meeting and adopt it then, but it clearly states in here that the bylaw will be effective 60 days from the time of adoption.
Our kids are amazing. You hear them out there?
Getting attention.
So you as a whole, your legislative body hearing.
That's what we're.
Yeah, and at the conclusion of that, will you have an opportunity to make changes if it were appropriate, if so there's a process to pass back to the planning commission, have rewrites. If the document as proposed is acceptable to you, you have 1 year, within 1 year of the date of the final planning commission hearing, which was
July 10th, I think.
you shall adopt or reject by a majority of the members of the legislative body at a meeting which is held after final public hearing and shall be effective 21 days after adoption unless petitioned for popular vote.
Okay, so It sounds like we could do it tonight, but in the interest of just allowing people, I think the recommendation, I also agree with, let it sit till next
Yes.
meeting. If we get any feedback, then we'll be in touch with the powers that be as necessary. And then we'll plan on warning it and adopting it at our next meeting.
Did you have adequate opportunity to discuss? And Alyssa answered all your questions? Okay.
I came in a little bit late also, so because I thought it was a fire.
I wanted in public to once again thank Alyssa for the assistance that she
Yes.
offered to the planning commission. It was, done under municipal planning grant that the planning commission applied for, received, that initiated the relationship with Wyndham Regional's consultancy. But Alyssa has gone way beyond what was required by the parameters of that grant agreement and has been very committed to this process and to helping the planning commission understand the intricacies of the regulation. So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Second.
Thank you. All right.
Yeah, well, you didn't really officially open the meeting, or were you supposed to, in the same
We
way?
did at 5:10.
At 5:10, so, yep, we'll accept a motion to adjourn.
Close.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So we'll call the regular meeting to order. There's different times on different clocks. 5:32.
You have on your
Yeah,
phone,
what do you
Steve,
think?
because that'd be more accurate.
5:32, there you go.
Thank you.
But we have a clock on that wall now, so yay.
Yes.
And that one's closer.
To the right time, yes. Not that it matters that much. Any adjustments to the agenda?
No.
No, okay. Approval of minutes from September 12th.
I'll move to approve the minutes of September 12th, 2018.
With a couple of name corrections.
Yeah.
I don't know how that happened.
Which
okay.
were what?
You're
Yes.
overworked and played more than one role, so we'll forgive you.
It was spell check.
I didn't even know.
Yeah, I didn't notice yours, I noticed.
That's my more, Steve Reed.
That's his formal name.
My spell check name.
All right, so those names amended.
Yes.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of September 12th. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Public comment on items not on the agenda. I know both of you are on the agenda, so unless there's nobody else here, so I doubt there's other public comment. So we can move on to select board items. Sidewalk repair on Kimball Hill. I believe that's,
my topic.
yes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Alrighty. I don't know the exact date, but approximately 6 months ago, I met with the select board with two issues in mind. One of them was the town's policy and ability and willingness to participate in some form with a drastic need of sidewalk repair from the west side of 14 Kimball Hill, which is the green building. It used to be the co-op in Silver Forest, all the way beyond the brick building. It's needed repair. I must have approached 5 town managers over the last 30 years. It was always sort of vague about whose responsibility is it, we'll get back to you, and as time progressed, it just got worse and worse. Quite frankly, hindsight's 20/20, but when funds were allotted for sidewalk repairs and the decisions were made of where those sidewalks would be repaired, one would think that stretch, when there was 3 stores, which were the only games in town, would have been a place in which that would have been a priority, because you had the public going between Silver Forest, the brick building, which had a glass store, offerings, and the general store. But for some reason, it never happened. Subsequently, even since last year, the condition of that sidewalk has deteriorated so badly that I began renovation on the brick building. And I apologize that it's a pretty ugly gap in the smile of Putney, but I have to get really, fundamentally realistic about how to approach it. I put in already probably $12,000 to $14,000 of shoring up the back of it, and I began renovating the front of the building a number of months ago, thinking that the brick, which was falling there, so that was cosmetic, that it was just veneer, and as I started picking at it, I realized that it was relatively structural, and I got a couple of contractors in, one being Paul Bemis, who did work, I think, does great masonry work, and Josh Perry from J&P, and it was very apparent that the entire retaining wall of the front of the building has had so much constant water pouring down through the cracks. I've got pictures, you could see it, through the cracks, and the way that the Main Street flows and doesn't hit the drains and accumulates, and it's just lifted and heaved, frozen, and now it's such a mess that it's going to be about a $20,000 just structural job to get the building sound enough to start a real renovation. And part of that is that the entire sidewalk, which should be taken down anyhow because it's so dangerous and leaky, has to be taken up so that the contractor get in there with some timbers or whatever it is to shore it up, and then Paul comes in and pours a footing for the entire length of the building, and then I have at least a sound building that is going to stand the course of time, and then I'm going to start siding it and putting windows in and canopy, and it could be a cute little building. So my procrastination on it was that, per getting permits for use, because I have to generate income to justify the expense, is that if the town had even any remote plans to contribute to sidewalk repair, it would be doubling the effort, because I've got to do it anyhow. So Josh and I spoke about what would be a way in which the town could allot some funds to participate in the upgrade. It'd certainly be a lot less than what would be if it was taking care of the whole shooting match. Before I made any decisions, I wanted to see where the town stands. I understand from the town manager that there is a fund for sidewalk repair. I don't want to be treated any special. I have probably given the town $300,000 worth of taxes over the years, and that doesn't include the cost of money, no kids in school. I haven't asked for anything, so I feel like that fund should be considered part of the taxpayers. So my question is, prior to getting your response, is how is that fund set up? How much is in there? How do you make decisions of where those funds go to? What funds previously have gone to what projects, and why were they justified and other ones weren't? I think there needs to be a little bit more explanation about how decisions are made than simply, yes or no. So that's my sort of like request and inquiry at the same time. That's in a nutshell.
Can you introduce yourself before we go any further?
Really?
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Pardon me. Oh, yeah. Okay. Do I just wait for you to tell me?
No, can you just tell us your name?
Oh, I thought you said excuse yourself.
No.
Oh. Maybe I farted or something. Okay. Yes. My name is Neil Madow. I own 14, which I'm speaking of, the brick building. I owned the 12 that's adjacent to the general store. Sold it recently to Jocelyn Boulard, and I own across the road, the pizza place. And as everybody knows, is that retail, restaurants, retail is tough everywhere. Taxes are high in Vermont. I'm not looking to make money. I'm looking to just whatever I put in the buildings over a certain reasonable amount of time, I can at least get a payback. you know, I could get a comment. I've gotten a couple of comments from Putney citizens saying, "Wow, you know, that's really ugly. What are you going to do about that? When are you going to do it?" And I said, "I'd love to do it tomorrow, but I don't have pockets deep enough to be able to do what I like to do and put these buildings, all of them, to use." And it's tough independently. There are independent businesses. The town isn't responsible to participate, but if there are gray areas about, you know, who does the sidewalk belong to? There's a right of way. Is that the town? Is this and that? Those are the kind of the ways where I think the town could be a little bit more proactive in helping. You know, so.
As far as the sidewalk fund, it was just, I think this was its first year. We've talked about it for a couple of years, but this is the first year we put money into it, and I believe we put $10,000 into it. Is that
Yeah, you
correct?
established the fund 2 years ago, and then
This year
past-
we funded it
Yes.
to the tune of $10,000.
Yeah.
So it's not something that's been around for a long time.
Okay.
And as far as decision-making on it, honestly, we really haven't had that conversation yet because it's such a new fund. You know, historically, as you know from the sidewalk on Mill Street, you know, we sort of, that was a it had to be done decision. And I don't remember exactly how we broke that up with
My
you. but-
recall on it was that it was vague about the property line and that couldn't just do portion of it. But I think why that was considered, you know, a priority was because I believe that it affected the vehicles going down or something about
It
the.
was a safety hazard. I mean, I
Yeah,
think it got to the point where it was, you know, it was really unusable as a sidewalk
Well,
anymore.
if you, you're talking about, okay, I know which area you're talking about, yeah. And this is certainly equal, if not more of a hazard, and used more frequently. And at that time, there was I think the town and I split the cost of a good portion of it, or at least, I think I did my own site work in the parking lot because I had a requirement to pave it for use.
Yeah.
And in tandem with that, I think the blacktop was done independently, and that is what, I think it was proportioned by how much square footage, because we got a better deal with the paving company. So I think, you know, there was, you know, certainly participation. I think the burden was less on the town and the burden was less on me if we did it just on our own. And that's kind of where I'm coming with my sentiment with this. Now, the fund that you speak of that's recently new, is that an annual dollar?
That's the intention, is to, well, at least for the foreseeable future. I mean, it's a capital fund. I mean, it's to build up some capital because, as you know, sidewalk repairs are expensive, so that we have some funding for that.
So it wasn't just simply a surplus of
No.
funds, so it could be
No.
done every year. And you have not been like approached or had a discovery committee to see where maybe the first project? Well, I'm
No.
glad I'm here.
There you go. I mean, you know, I think the intent of the sidewalk fund is really for maintenance of the sidewalks that we're putting in as municipal sidewalks. And I don't know the history of this one well enough to know whether the town put it in or whether the co-op put it in or, you know, who put it in. I don't.
What's the definition? Because I hear the word, but I don't know what everyone is. What's a municipal sidewalk? How is that?
Well, if we funded it and installed it, or raised money for it and installed it, then I would consider it a municipal sidewalk.
Right, but prior to, I mean, for instance, the whole area in front of the Performing Arts Center, coming down this way,
Right.
that was done about when the tavern was
20
renovated or so, thereabout.
Yeah.
Now, that at some time, you know, either it belongs to the town, which I don't believe it does, or it belongs to the property owner. So if indeed.
Well, we installed that, the town installed that, so the town takes responsibility for it if they, I mean, I don't remember the exact details of that agreement, but that's part of the Maple Gray
So
walkway.
there wasn't a sidewalk there, ever? How did people?
I don't honestly remember whether there was actually, I mean, I think there was a path there, but I don't, I mean, it was one person's sort of mission over time, Maple Gray, who it's named after, to create a sidewalk that came from the center of town and went all the way to.
I think along the way there, I'm quite certain that a lot of the sidewalks pre-existed. They could have been at different levels. They could have been kind of funky.
I think it was
and
mixed and matched, yeah.
Yeah,
So
they were, I had a few of them myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think what's important for the committee is to like really determine, is there really going to be a preference of where money is allowed to sidewalks that are clearly town property, or or just use. You know, I think the use and the safety becomes the biggest issue, because the town has a right of way to all those sidewalks up to the buildings for access.
Yeah, I would assume you're right. I mean, that makes sense if you just look at the measurement from Centerline. I don't know the exact specs on Kimball Hill, but we'd have to check that. But you know, I don't know enough about the history of it to say whether it's one that the town of Putney installed or one that the owners installed. So I'm not sure.
Is that going to matter to the committee at this point?
It might matter in how we consider it. Yeah. I mean, I think that if a business or residence owner installs something on their property, whether it's in town right of way or not, it becomes the responsibility of that owner. I'm guessing we couldn't possibly find out an accurate enough history about how that sidewalk
these
happened.
sidewalks probably go back
A long way.
100 years, you know, or a long
Well,
way.
I mean, you know, I don't know, for example, when the co-op opened, whether there was actually a sidewalk out there. I don't remember, but.
There was in the 80s.
Yeah, exactly, that's what I would say, but I don't know previous to that. I'm not saying that
No,
doesn't
just trying to
rule
get
it
clear,
out as a
yeah.
possibility, I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, we have to be knowledgeable about that kind of stuff, because otherwise, the next house up the road says, well, wait, this is a sidewalk and you guys need to build it.
I understand that, and that's
You know, so-
I'm asking how those decisions are made, because if a private driveway sidewalk that pre-existed gets allocated money to upgrade it, then certainly why is it the neighbor getting that same kind of courtesy? There has to be sort of, you know, not just
A definition.
A definition, right?
Yes.
Right. So I want to, you know, I think that's important for me to know and for you to know. I did, you know, when I put the town water lines in, I had to come and pull up certain portions of the sidewalk, and then would pour that portion that would be true. But
Back in.
right now, I mean, I got pictures. I mean, you could all walk over there sometime in the next handful of days. Is that it's like a roller coaster. And you know, I asked one of the town managers. I said, look, you know, I'm not I don't get too worried about accidents, but you know, I salt the sidewalks and shovel them to try to make sure that my tenants and pedestrians don't slip and fall. But I have a little control over if somebody catches the toe of their boot and they go flying over the sidewalk. Now, if it's my property, but the town has a right of way, does the town have a responsibility to maintain it? I don't know.
That's
I
the
don't know.
question that I don't have a clear answer to. We should probably check with council sort of how we address it. We can also, you know, ask
Yeah.
opinion of the highway department.
All right. So, you know, so my I don't stop being so talkative here, is that, you know, my perspective is that even though there aren't retail stores there any longer, it still is comparatively a highly trafficked side of the road, so, you know, sidewalk, and there's a lot of pedestrians that are not just going into the few buildings there, but going all the way down to the general store, and that it's an eyesore, it's a safety issue, and that if the answers of where that money is going to go is basically based on what I should think is the most important thing, as long as it's treated fairly to everybody else, is where most needed, where it's going to have the greatest impact aesthetically and infrastructure-wise. And I could think if you walk around town, I don't think any sidewalk's hurting more than, the only one that's hurting almost as bad is the one in the pizza place, but that doesn't get nearly as much traffic, and I don't want to, you know, but, you know, so it's not just the sidewalk at this point, it's a lot of funds that I have to come out of my own pocket to renovate that building, and, you know, Josh had suggestions such as, you know, the sidewalks have to come out anyhow to put the footing in, but if the town is willing to do part of it, you know, he could do the site work, the town could participate maybe in some of the, what is it called, yardage of whatever, of concrete or something, you know?
And I don't think that's necessarily unrealistic. I think we would need to start with quotes on it. I think we need to come up with, you know, I mean, one of the questions is, for example, curbing. You know, do we want it / need it to be granite curbing, things like that? Does it make sense? What's the budget? So,
Would it be helpful, because I'm going to get in touch with Josh, is to him write up a proposal that's, you know, to me, of what it's going to cost me. Say that the town doesn't want to contribute. You know, it might just take longer for me to do it on my own. I prefer not to, so I'm not going to say, you know, if you don't do it, it's not going to be done. I'm not going to play that game. But it sure would make things go smoother and quicker and feel good. And then, you know, he'll give different proposals where he and his guys and his equipment at my expense would do certain things, and then maybe the town has some manpower and equipment that he wouldn't do.
I mean, it's beneficial to the town if we can use equipment to, you know, I mean, if he's charging you for equipment that we have, for example,
Right.
that's a less expensive way for us to contribute to the project. I think this is really a discussion that should include Brian,
Right.
because it's really a highway department
Right.
discussion. We should find out about the right-of-way question, you know, anything we can about
Right.
history,
I was
which I don't
gonna do
think
some
we're gonna
research
find, so.
And if we're replacing this one section, I mean, there's more to that sidewalk than this one
Well,
section.
yeah, no, and I think Neil's pointing that out, and I think he's accurate. And that would be the question, like, that would be my question about granite curbing, et cetera. You know, sort of where do you start, where do you stop, and
There's
what's the
stairs
cost?
in that
And it-
sidewalk, would that be an issue?
What's that?
There's stairs at the end of that sidewalk, would that be an issue for us as a?
It depends, you know, I don't think we'd have to get the state to weigh in it, because it's not a state highway.
Are you referring to the stairs at the end of? the
Yeah,
entrance
I'm just
building?
wondering about like
So-
handicapped accessibility
Yeah,
and
the,
regulations around that.
Yeah, that sidewalk was done years ago, at my expense after an unfortunate fire. And that was, and also you have the awning over it. So from the alley between the brick building and the former Mellon building,
Right.
that is in pretty good shape. So that doesn't really have to be, it's very good shape, it doesn't have to be touched. And then once you get down that 1 or 2 steps, that whole sidewalk in front of what I call the annex, which is part of the building that sits back adjacent to the general store, all the way to the end of the general store, is in great shape.
Yeah.
What's really hurting is from where the Hendricks building, the black house, to the end of the brick building. And all in bad shape, worse being the brick building. From my perspective, priority is the brick building because I have to do major renovation, and, you know, why do it twice?
So I would say we should probably start by consulting Brian. And then depending on what he has to say, just sort of conceptually, we would communicate that to you. Maybe you communicate that to Josh if he's going to be doing your masonry, and then we sort of see, and then get some quotes based on that, et cetera.
Apparently it's not gonna happen, you know, I was hoping to get it in the next few weeks, but apparently it's not gonna happen. So my apologies is that I really can't, I could tar back the front of the building, so it doesn't have those big pieces of plywood, but winter's coming, and if this comes to pass with the town contributing, and, you know, my contractors do their thing, we're looking at, earliest from my perspective is, you know, spring. So you have to kind of realize that it isn't really out of choice that I'm keeping that ugly building ugly. I want to get it fixed as soon as possible, but
Well,
there's a big part of it.
you know,
you know?
I mean, if it's just the section in front of the brick building, we
Right.
might be able to come up with some sort of at least initial compromise, you know, I don't know, I mean, I think what,
We have to get
I think we,
information
exactly,
back.
we have to do a little information
Yeah.
I know
gathering
that
first
Josh
and
would
see.
jump on it in a couple of days' notice, but I didn't want to start anything. I was gonna be gone in 2 weeks, but I could stick around a little bit longer, and, yeah, if there's anything I could do to, you know, get Josh to call the town road crew, or some
You know,
proposals.
Probably need
Brian.
Brian over there, talk it through, see, and just,
Okay, so how do you want me to wait to hear from you, or do you want me to take some action? How do you want to proceed?
why don't you get Brian and I together in the next?
We'll work together with Brian.
Sounds good.
And then you talk to Josh.
And maybe if Brian's willing and Josh, and he can meet and come up with something that, you know,
Yeah.
I think it's gonna be, you know, more or less a project, you know.
It'll probably be next week when I can get Brian over there.
Next week?
Next week.
That'd be great.
He's finishing up a big project.
Great. And we'll
So,
get over it.
yeah.
That's all I'm asking.
I will definitely get a hold of you, Neil.
Great, okay. Well,
Okay.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. All right. Take care, folks.
We'll
Thanks.
be in touch.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
All right, have a good night, Neil.
Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Solicitation for Act 174 for Town Energy Planning Element. Is that you, Elizabeth?
Hi.
Oh, that's you, Tom.
He
That
knows
makes
more than
sense.
I do. I just wrote a bunch of stuff.
But that's your building, is that correct?
No,
What's that?
Which
No,
one is
no, no.
174?
no, this is an act.
Sorry, yeah, all right.
I mean,
I-
no,
I have-
Thinking
I have-
Kimball Hill just above it and 170.
I have some material. Can I present this to you?
What's that?
Some material that I have.
Yeah, please.
What's
Good action. I'm Tom Nelson, Putney Energy Committee. So it is actually a letter of interest, just signed by the other party that needs to sign it. I printed more than I needed for you guys, sorry. One for each of you.
Cool.
Did you forward this to us, Fred? I feel like I read this.
Yes.
You may have, a lot of this information has been going around in emails. Basically what it is we have the opportunity to get technical assistance to bring our energy element of our town plan into compliance with Act 174, which is the act that brings us to meeting the goals of 90% renewable energy production by 2050. So what would happen is we submit this letter of interest, then Wyndham Regional Commission will meet with the Selectboard, the Energy Committee, and the Planning Commission to determine if we're actually ready to write this plan, and if we are, they would help us
What
with
it
it.
would look like. Yeah. And I don't, there are no costs to us involved
No.
yet.
Not at this point.
Yeah, exactly, if we were to keep going with that. Analysis would be, I mean, electricity we're presumably doing okay on because of our photovoltaics, but otherwise, what are we looking at? We're looking at, we've shifted to mini splits in the fire department. We could increase our solar to cover that. But otherwise, we're looking at bio and or just other sort of generally.
Those kinds of
other
questions are
possibilities.
exactly what this is for, to
It's
get the
to look at-
technical
explore
assistance
those.
to help us make those determinations
Okay,
and then write
yeah.
that into our plan. Exactly.
And Wyndham Wood Heat certainly, I'm sure you're not unfamiliar, that they've already done an audit and sort of
Who has done an audit?
proposed.
Which,
Wyndham Wood Heat Initiative through Wyndham Regional has looked at
I found
least
that.
the fire
I found
department
that,
and
yeah.
town hall. I think everybody agrees that the highway department is sort of a losing battle at this point, and how we approach that over the long term, I'm not sure. But they would have, and that's presumably is at Wyndham's, the records are presumably at Wyndham Regional, so that would be a source of quite a bit of the basic energy load,
Right,
except.
and this technical assistance would help us put that all together.
Put it together and to come up with a plan. Sounds like a great idea to me.
Yeah, no,
I agree.
absolutely.
So, a motion to approve the request by the Putney Energy Committee to participate in the technical assistance program for Act 174.
Yeah, so moved.
And seconded.
If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Let's see, so I will sign
Initially, we
this.
thought it was everybody, but it turned out it's just one.
Just the shares.
Yeah, to sign it.
Initially, I had 3 lines for everybody with their title.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
Thank you for doing this work.
Thank you for
Bring it
agreeing.
into the,
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, the frustrating thing for me is the sort of, well, the transitional time presumably between, you know, just in general, how do you get from here to where we want to be? And how do you invest in the infrastructure appropriately during that time period, you know? And I think, for example, the mini splits are a great step in the right direction, but if we don't have sufficient PV to cover the electrical usage of that, then financially that doesn't make as much sense for the town as
You
it
get the
could
technical
otherwise.
assistance and you can read all about that.
And then go from there. Yeah, exactly. So, sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay.
It's a group effort.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Yes, for some reason I
And if,
thought it was you.
Well, no, I'm secretary, so I have to do all the legwork, catching everybody and stuff. But if you hear of anybody that would be interested in joining our committee, we would love more people.
What do you have now, 5-ish, I think?
Yeah, because John has bowed out. John Johnson.
Oh, yes,
I
he's
mean,
busy.
yeah, if he weren't, it would have been nice.
Yeah.
And Morgan is pretty busy and he's overseas right now.
Yes.
He's gone a lot.
Sounds like he's having quite an adventure.
But as a result, you know, we could use some more people.
I have a
That's
young
the big-
man that wants to
Does live
attend
in
one of your,
town?
yes. He wants to attend a meeting. I'm gonna give Tom Nelson his name.
But you can just send me an email. I'm the
Okay.
one that sends out all the stuff.
Okay,
Sounds good.
I will send it around, but I'm kind of the glue.
all right.
No meetings because I was out of town. Meetings, but I rattled everybody.
There you go.
Okay.
Thank
All right,
you.
Thank you,
excellent.
Elizabeth.
See ya.
But I'm grateful for that.
Yes.
Yeah. Land gift, Ann Wheeler.
So, it was on our agenda last time.
Yeah,
So it's old business.
yeah.
So I don't want it just to fall by the wayside.
And we did move to accept it, didn't we?
I thought we did. Did we not?
No, I think we tabled it because you wanted me to talk to Larry to get the specifics.
And
And
Were you
I
able to
have
do
not
that?
done that yet. So, now you were gonna visit, you were gonna do a little site visit.
down there, we
Yes.
talked about that the other,
Yes.
for recycling. I haven't been
Yes.
able to do that
Okay.
yet. So, the question came up is whether it might be a suitable site for recycling.
Yeah.
yeah,
I don't know yet.
The wastewater treatment plant does not think they can use that property because of the topography. So we need to look at it and see if it can be used for anything else.
Yeah. All right, so,
Runs down there too.
I don't mind calling Ann and just letting her know that we're looking
We're still
into it.
working through it. I mean, I
Yes.
think we need an opinion from Larry
Yes,
before
I don't think we
before
should be jumping into.
No. So we'll just table that again.
Yeah.
And yeah, take a drive down.
Yeah.
Take a drive
Yeah,
down,
if somebody
see
can
what
take
you
a
think.
drive down there
Brainstorm.
and take a look.
Do whatever it takes.
And I'll call Ann.
Town hall front door estimate. We have the estimate from Cole Streeter. It was my opinion, Cole's estimate is a good estimate and it's totally appropriate, but I think we can accomplish much of the same without doing that extent of work. I had priced a pair of doors for it, And I want to say, I think we talked, maybe I talked with Chip about it. I want to say that the pair of doors was roughly $1,800. They're big doors. But I tried to get in touch with the guy who would have given me that estimate. He was not in his office today, so I have not followed up on that. But I will verify that, and then ideally what I think we would do is put proper storms over the windows, because all the sort of structure and detailing of that is all in reasonably good condition. So, you know, initially we sort of said, let's get a bid on doing the whole thing, replacing windows, et cetera. You know, in retrospect, I'm not sure it's a lot of money, and I think there are better places we could spend it, so.
Yeah, I did confirm too, this building is on the historic list, so we need to be careful about how we do changes and.
Well, and the door, actually, we should confirm that. I mean, I consulted Lisa
Yeah,
Papazian.
I want to talk with Lisa.
I consulted her for the design of the doors, because
Yeah.
we're going back to something
Right.
a little closer to what was
Maybe
originally
we can
there.
move that into some potential grant funding.
Right.
Could be, although,
And we
you know,
can, for down here, get grant money for certain
Yes.
things like doors and windows, so we
Yeah.
have to be very careful how we approach the renovation.
I mean, I think that, you know, we have a certain level of urgency with those doors because
We do, I mean,
they're hemorrhaging heat.
yes. yes.
They're also, you know, at one point last year, I had to come down, well, a couple times I had to come and plane them because they weren't closing. And then the problem is you plane them in the summertime when they're not closing, and then of course the gap in them in the wintertime is
Yeah.
dramatic, and then
And the
one of
water's
the
just
hinges
coming
fell
through.
off.
Yeah.
So-
The bottoms
so
of
I
the
think we-
badges fell off.
well, just one of them.
Just one, only one. It was
only
just a
on the-
hinge, you know.
just
That's
on
why
the-
the
only on the
doors,
one that's
the
stationary,
chair
so
still
not the one that we,
is in front
Yeah.
of that door.
because there's a hinge there.
Because if I take that chair out of there, somebody will go through that door.
Right, exactly.
And it-
Well, although it's very hard to open. Yeah, I mean, I think that we should be exploring, of course, grant money for that, but for those doors, we should probably just go ahead. So I will
Okay.
find out what that quote was, get those doors ordered, and then, you know, I'll sort of assign a guy to it and we'll
Okay.
figure out how to make it happen. And I won't get paid, but you'll see, we'll figure that
Maybe
out. Yeah, exactly. So we'll try and figure out how to make that happen.
Okay.
No, I was
Do
just
we
gonna
need a
say,
motion?
yeah, do you need a motion?
No.
No. No, I just was gonna say, were you thinking that we were gonna call on you tonight? I didn't want you to think that you had to wait around until we call on you. I think. Josh
No, that's fine, yeah.
referring to some other time. You're welcome to say, I'm just.
I mean, whatever you,
He's just saying,
Okay, yeah.
I'm kind of just watching the process, so.
I
Yeah.
wanted to make sure you didn't think, you know.
No, no, absolutely. Yeah.
I'll make sure he's at town meeting, March 5th.
There you go, we can introduce him.
Yeah.
You know everyone.
So next on the agenda is the Renaud gravel pit update. We met this morning with Corey Frazee and his assistant Taylor from Stevens and Associates, Brian, Lee, Karen, myself, and Lee, who's the highway department head for Dummerston, and Hugh, blanking on Hugh's last name, Warden, who's a select board representative in Dummerston. And we walked the pit, talked about the sort of concept of this meeting was we've contracted with Stevens and Associates to do that sort of cost benefit analysis for us. So the concept was to walk the pit and just make sure everybody was on the same page as far as what we were all thinking about how we might use the material. You know, until we have that back, there's not conflicting sort of estimates of it as much as they're just a wide variety in how people are looking at it, what the possibilities are. So, and that's really Corey's job, is to sort of narrow that down and fine tune it so that we can see really what, or as close as we can, what's there and what's the value of that, and do comparison with the cost of trucking material and the cost of any number of other things.
And the lifespan.
And the
of
lifespan.
Pet.
So we're working on that, and until we have further information, I think we really, that's about all I have to say. All right, budget discussion schedule for 2020.
So October, next month, or next meeting, you'll have budgets. And I've talked to Brian, I've talked to Tom. They're working on budgets for 2020.
For
Budgets for 2020.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that we start looking at that and start planning. I did put on this list the Putney Community Cares, which is Putney Cares, Putney Family Services.
Oh, that's right.
Combined.
They talked about that, yeah.
Yes, so in your packet is the Social Service Agency funding policy. So our next meeting, we can discuss how we want to approach the new Putney Community Cares.
Right.
Because they were separate and now they're going to be combined. So now we're looking at $10,000+ and our social service funding is based on the budget and percentages. So do we change the policy? How do we want to approach this?
I think, I can't remember sort of where we ended that discussion with them when they came before us before.
They will come back in front of us.
Yeah.
If you want me to invite them, I will.
I think we ended it with, we'll work through this.
Exactly, and I can't,
Possibly
Yeah,
you know,
revisit the policy and,
I mean, I think we all agreed that, or all agreed conceptually anyway, that if they're sort of doing the work of two services, they should get the money of two services, but how we make that sort of legitimate based on our policy
Right.
is not perhaps that simple a question, so.
So it's something to think about.
Yeah, sorry. I thought
It's
that
for
was
the
part
next
of
meeting.
it.
Yeah, for the next meeting, could you additionally bring the current
The allocation.
allocation, different groups that are getting that?
Yep.
I think it'd be
I
good
can
to-
get them out of the town report if we want to look at it right now, but I will definitely make sure we
Yeah,
have all
I
the
think it'd be good
facts.
to kind of see.
Yeah,
if I'm remembering right too from last year, we wanted to possibly revisit how, Sevens was funded, didn't we?
Yeah,
We did, yeah. I mean, it's a question of whether we continue to have it as an article or whether we include it as a line item in the budget.
like we do with Sevets, which makes sense.
That's what she was asking
Yes.
about. Sentence, did we decide to include it as a line item?
I don't
Or
think we did.
I don't think we've
It was
clearly
an
done that.
article because it was.
Yeah,
Last
it was
year.
voted, it has been
Yes.
historically voted on.
And it's 3 years running, it's been voted up.
Right,
So, yeah, I mean, I think we just need to decide whether we want to keep asking them to vote it or whether we include it
Right.
as a line item.
Yeah.
Even if we put it in as a line item, it's of course because of the discussion about the general fund, it's still up for interpretation or up for
Right.
discussion as to how much we fund it with. So, it would certainly simplify the process for them. If we want to keep funding it, then we should probably go ahead and do that. And whether we then continue to invite them to be at town meeting in order to discuss it. I mean, we can certainly invite them, but whether we feel they need to be there to discuss it as a budget line item, I mean, maybe that wouldn't be a bad idea for
Yeah.
sort of this year
Right.
to, as we make a change in how we're
Yeah.
funding it, to have somebody there to sort of,
And they have a beautiful report this year,
yeah.
you know, which.
I mean, there's no question in my mind that what they do is valuable. It's not always that easy to see that.
It's not always tangible.
It's hard to put concrete
Yeah.
numbers on it,
Yeah.
exactly. But, you know, as people in town meeting last year were arguing, we need to be, you know, there's sort of two sides of
Right.
the opinion of we need to be doing something. We absolutely need to be doing something. So, you know, throwing good money at bad, of course, is never a good way to do that, but I don't think we're doing that. I think this is a valuable investment and probably should just be a line item.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's always up for
But he
review.
was charged last year with really coming with a pretty concise, or maybe I should say more detailed information about exactly what they do.
Yes.
And that's what,
Yeah.
and perhaps that's what this,
Yeah.
Well, they've
They
been,
have a really nice
they've
report.
been doing a good job at putting information together. Again, it's hard to put concrete numbers on any of it, so they've been putting concrete numbers on what they can, but it's also, you know, it's bigger picture than that.
Yeah.
So,
It really is.
and out of curiosity, how many years have we been funding them?
3,
3, okay.
I think.
So
I think last year was the 3rd year, might have been the 4th, but I think it was the 3rd. What do you
2
think?
years anyway.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure,
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure
I
it's,
think it's-
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure it's 3.
I think it's 3.
I think
Yeah.
so.
I do believe it's 3
Okay.
at a minimum, but
Yeah, 3 or 4, I don't think it's any more than that, but I'm pretty sure it's 3. Okay, so I agree with you, we need to look at how we're gonna do that, but it's a separate question from the funding of social
just
service
reminded me of it.
agencies. So, why don't we plan on just having a little sort of, when we're looking at that budget item,
Okay,
let's look a little closer at how we think we want to handle that.
okay.
You know, I think that the one thing that's a little challenging about it is, I mean, my recollection is, at least in last year's budget, there were only 3 entities that we funded at level A, which were Putney Cares,
Yeah.
Family services.
Putney Family Services, and the Community Center.
Yeah.
So,
And the
and the
food
food
shelf.
shelf, yeah.
There's 4.
was it 4 last
Yeah.
year? Okay. You know, sort of the fairness of, you know, if we're giving that much more to that organization, should we be giving that much more to the food shelf? You know, I don't think we probably want to rewrite this policy, but it would be nice to figure out how to fund them appropriately within the policy if that's possible. I'm not sure it is, so we'll have to look at that. And/or, I mean, my sense was that there's always been some level of leeway as to how it breaks up, but it's pretty clear if you read this policy, seemingly, that there really isn't much leeway in there.
No, the policy doesn't look like it has much wiggle room.
No, I was thinking that there was something that sort of said at the discretion of, but I don't think that's the case, so.
Be interesting to
So,
look at the amendments and
What the original, yeah.
yeah.
You know, I mean, item 5 of the policy states all agencies within a classification will receive the same amount of funding, so that complicates that a little bit.
Yes, it
So,
does.
we need to look at how that might be handled. Of course, the flip side is if we're going from 4 organizations to 3, they're all
Getting
a larger portion
Right.
of that anyway. Figure that one out.
Yeah, it's just something that needs to be on the radar.
Yes.
We don't want it to fall through the cracks.
No. Just keep passing your stuff. All right. So presumably, we're basically, everybody's gonna come to us for a budget meeting. So do you have an actual schedule yet or not?
I don't, but I'm thinking the first meeting in October, we're gonna start, we'll have financials,
Yeah,
so we'll be looking at that. And then I'm hoping Tom might be ready. I know Brian's not gonna be ready yet, but
Yeah.
he's already thinking about what his needs are for 2020.
yeah,
So, and as far as, general fund, I mean, we're gonna look at insurances, we know those are gonna go up.
of course, yeah.
Changes in staff, which I don't foresee many, but, or any, hopefully.
Had enough.
Yeah, but, that'll be something we're gonna have to discuss too.
At some point, we'll have to discuss, yeah, I mean, this is less, well, like, it's sort of a budgetary discussion, but, at some point, we're gonna have to look at
Staff,
town clerk,
yes.
staffing,
Yeah.
et cetera.
That's in my town manager's.
And how we wanna,
report, yeah.
it is, okay,
Yeah.
so, I mean, typically, we wait a little later to sort of have one budget meeting after another, but,
Right,
practically, it would be nice to get ahead of them if we can. So as people
Yeah.
are ready, let's go ahead and hear them and,
well, I remember
Go
what
from
happened, when Chip was here, so it was like late January when it finally was approved, so.
which is fine. I mean,
Yeah,
we don't want to miss anything, so
Right,
we want to be
right.
thorough.
yeah,
But
we do.
but it would be nice to be doing some of those
Yeah.
budget discussions in October instead of stacking them up. I mean,
Yeah.
it's usually sort of between
November.
Thanksgiving and Christmas, we're just
So
having
the
weekly
goal-
meetings and be
The
nice.
goal would be
not to do that.
like the end of December to like,
Really
have
have
a
it
budget,
pinned down.
yes.
Yeah, no, and then we
Yes.
usually sit on it for a little while
Yeah.
just in case, and
Right.
lets you get to end of
Yeah.
calendar year, so on
yeah,
and so
and we
forth.
can
So-
have, 2 or 3 drafts, but
Right,
it's gonna be a work in progress.
yeah,
But if we can define it by the end of December,
get it closer.
Yeah.
I mean, the nice thing also is that, if we end up with a bunch of found money at that point, it
Mhm.
gives us a little bit of time to have discretion with it.
right.
The likelihood of that is almost non-existent, but
no,
hey,
you
it's a
bring
nice
up-
fantasy.
No, you bring up a very good point, because our audit is in progress. And John's gonna be here tomorrow, actually, working with me
Yeah,
on some more stuff. So we don't even know where we're at with that yet. So that's a very good point.
right. Just get those things done step by step, so.
Find that extra 200,000.
All right, town manager, got a
Okay.
report?
The town forest has finally transferred to the town from the school district. The
Okay.
deed, the survey are all recorded, so that is completed.
That was a ton of work for Emily.
It was, she did a really good job.
Yes.
Emily Pals did
Yeah.
that?
Yes, yeah.
Good, thank you, Emily.
So, in conversation, I think the next step was a nonprofit was gonna be created.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
then the town would transfer it
Ultimately,
back.
turn it over to the nonprofit.
So I don't know how long that's gonna take, but,
Well, there was a.
3 years, I
it
think
wa-
it is.
Yeah, and
but I don't
I
think she was
think I think we left the
walked away
language open.
a little loose, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, because we felt that, and for some reason I remember 2 years being a milestone in there too, and I can't remember exactly why, and I may be totally off, it might have started with a discussion of 2 and then went to 3 or something,
Yeah.
but I think we left the language open enough, because we didn't want to end up with a situation where if it turns out to be you know, 3 years and 3 months that
Right.
we have to go through a bunch of steps to.
Yeah.
So I think we're okay on that. But
But they're hoping to get it done
keep moving.
far sooner.
I'm
than
sure,
that,
yeah.
Yes.
No, and we all had that conversation that sooner's better, but
Mhm.
in the meantime, it's secure, so.
It is. And I think she is relieved of that. Holland
She said she's
Hill.
gonna sleep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's impressive. I was up there the other day and
Holland Hill?
I was
I
not
have-
expecting.
I haven't been up yet.
Oh my gosh,
I wasn't
it's something
expecting
So you went up
else.
to.
Yes, I haven't seen this yet, but I was up when.
Yeah, I was wondering how in the heck they got it up there.
It's the box culvert.
Yeah.
I haven't seen that yet, I just
Yeah.
saw the dirt work and was amazed
There's
by,
more pictures on the other side.
holy
I mean, you could play
smokes.
racquetball inside that thing.
Yeah.
That's, the kids are gonna have fun.
No, don't even
No.
suggest.
I didn't say that. I take it
She was
back.
talking about her kids, yeah.
Yeah.
My kids will be in very big trouble if I catch them, so.
So
Yeah.
Brian.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It's-
So this is a large box culvert that has been placed, box culvert just being in this instance, a four-sided concrete culvert that's placed instead of the older style round culverts.
Yeah,
So,
And it's a
wow,
monster.
It
It
is.
is.
I can't believe it.
something else.
So it's possible that traffic will be moving across that bridge by the end of the week, according to Brian.
Wow.
So he's been working with A.S. Clark and,
No hitches?
No
No,
glitches.
glitches?
No.
no. The crane was up there on Friday, so they placed the culvert in on Friday.
Yeah,
But even with the rain, they've been, Tuesday, Brian,
able to keep moving.
yeah, Tuesday he let him go home, you know, or get out of the rain, so. But, so they started this project September 13th and it's almost completed.
Although, as Brian pointed out today, there will definitely, you know, it's almost functional, but there will
Right.
be, you know, a significant amount of.
Like guardrails. and
Exactly,
bell
and
yeah.
seating and all
Yeah.
the, you know, sort of all
Plus
the
he has to
detailing.
take the
but-
temporary road out in that
All the-
culvert, that pipe there,
Mhm.
so. But he seems pretty happy with the schedule. And it was a very tight schedule,
Mhm.
so.
I spoke to one of the residents and they said it didn't have much of an effect on them either.
He
so
said he
that's-
hasn't, he said he hasn't gotten.
That's
any
great.
I
complaints.
haven't had one phone call about
That's
that
great.
project,
That's great.
Detour's easy.
so.
Yeah,
Good job, Brian.
yeah. thank you.
And crew. Administrative assistant, I have hired one. She will start on October 8th, which is a Monday.
Yay.
Yeah. So, yeah, she interviewed back in February and found out that the position was reopened and approached me, and her name is Alyssa Bingham Harlow, newly married, so. Good. Yeah, I think she's gonna be a good fit. She has a good financial background,
Excellent.
so, which is gonna be perfect for billing
Mhm.
and taking tax payments, utility payments.
Great.
So she's willing to learn and, yeah.
Sounds good. Excellent.
Yes. Town clerk, as we already spoke, is an interim position which expires November 6th at midnight. So I would, I'd bring it up because it's something we're gonna have to decide on. The select board does need to make a decision.
Mhm.
I think our intention was to extend, basically, the intention was to keep it till that election and extend it beyond that to town meeting day
Right.
if there was a need, and/or, I mean, that's another part of the discussion that's gonna have to come up, is whether, I haven't heard anything about a petition to have
Go
the,
back
or
to-
to return an article on those being appointed positions as opposed to elected positions, but we don't know, and/or we need to decide whether we're happy with it continuing to be an appointed position, and/or whether we feel it should go on as an article. So we don't need to have that discussion too thoroughly yet, but
No.
it's a
Something to think
discussion we
about.
should have.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So Scott Henry, as you know, is still the treasurer
Mhm.
through March. We're without an assistant because Deb
Was the
was the assistant.
Mhm.
And I can't remember, you told me Alyssa does not live in Putney, or does?
She lives in Westminster.
Okay, so she's not a candidate for that.
If it's appointed, can't
It's
she
a-
be?
It's appointed and
Yeah.
Scott makes the appointment.
Oh, that might be right.
All right,
Boy, we'd have to double check that.
okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't remember. Yeah, because it's always been an appointed position, but historically, it's been somebody from town, whether it needs to be or not, I don't know.
I will confirm.
Yeah, we don't even, council doesn't even, I mean, that could just be VLCT
Okay.
or statute or.
I think, I'll look in the statute, but because it's been appointed by us.
It may have shifted,
Right,
yeah.
right. But I'll
I
look.
mean, Larry, if Larry knows right off the bat, but we.
I'll go to
I would-
VLCT.
I'd start with
because-
VLCT
yes.
and
Yep,
then if there's a question about it,
Larry's busy right now.
yeah.
Grant writing class is coming up in October. It's October 22nd and 23rd. It's happening in Keene. I'd like permission to take those 2 days to attend the class.
Any guarantees on return on our investment?
I hope so.
Yeah.
No, I hope so. This is why I'd like to do it.
Yeah,
All right, so I will be out 2 days.
no, it sounds like a great idea.
It's not Burlington, so
Yeah,
I
which
can
is
check in throughout the day,
even better, yeah.
so.
Good.
Yeah. One other topic of discussion that should be considered is recycling. With town meeting coming up, having some money in the budget that was put aside.
Yeah, we should revisit, I mean, we have that information compiled as to what the expenses are, especially after we get the bid on the trucking. Karen and I talked a little bit about this the other day, and, I mean, 2 years ago, we put $40,000 into the budget thinking that would cover what at that time was, $12,000 to $15,000 investment in infrastructure, and then 25 in trucking, but then the bids for just the trucking alone came in significantly higher than we anticipated, and I don't remember exactly what it was, but if it's gone anywhere from then, it will have gone up.
Right.
So we could ask, I mean, I think the only bid we got on that was Triple T.
Yep.
So we could ask them to revisit that bid,
Yeah,
just out of
okay.
interest.
I forwarded you, I'm trying to remember the name of the company now. It's one of the major trash haulers. Remember we were in a conversation, email conversation with a
Yeah.
gentleman.
Was
that
it
sent us-
Casella?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that offer still stands from him. I'm guessing it probably doesn't because it seems like these prices are changing quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
What
because
was the nature of that discussion? Well,
he was talking about collection, curbside.
curbside.
And there was an opportunity, he was working with another town locally
Mm-hmm.
where we might have been able to pair up with them. I don't remember all of the details, it was months
Yeah.
ago, but.
I can collectively pull everything back together.
yeah,
People are still asking,
Mhm.
so I
Yeah.
think it's important that we,
at least
Revisit.
discuss it.
Yeah.
No, and part of mine and Karen's discussion the other day was that sort of no matter how you slice it, it's a financial discussion.
Right.
And that you know, I'm happy to keep having that discussion at town meeting, but we also have to be cognizant of the fact that those who come to town meeting are more likely to be able to afford recycling than those who do not. And so sort of how we take that into consideration, because, you know, adding a ballpark $60,000 line item with the intention of that growing at, you know, whatever, 5 to 10% per year
Right.
for however long, that's not insignificant. And, you know, it's a small change in any individual's taxes, but many people don't have the room for a small change. So,
That's all true.
so, but yes, we should certainly look at it again and see. I mean, it would be nice if there were, it would have been nice if there were more bidders. I mean, it was great that
Right.
Triple T bid. I think it was a realistic number. It just would have been nice to have seen, but, you know, most of them with the relatively recent changes
Right.
are, any of the smaller operations just have all they can handle as it is. So,
Yeah, they're struggling.
and Casella would be an example of one that might be able to, I don't know whether we solicited a bid from them, we didn't receive a bid from them, whether we asked them to or not. And Ruggiero the same, I'm not
Yeah.
sure.
I talked to Joe, but I know what Westminster pays and Ruggiero does.
It's curbside for
Yes, yeah, recycling and
Right,
solid waste.
yeah.
So, I mean, is it a matter of having Joe, you know, take a look around town and give us price?
Well,
I mean, you have to be careful because there's a lot of different changes, you know, because you have solid waste, you have the recycling, you have yard waste. Now, I think food scraps.
compostables,
Yes.
2020, or is that
Yeah,
2019?
Yeah, but that's coming up.
For commercial, it's already,
It's already,
Right.
yeah.
Right,
but for residential, I want to say it's 2020, but
Yeah.
it's something like that.
which drives that cost
Up
up,
more.
yes.
And it's not a small number for Westminster, and Westminster, it's a comparable population base. So, I mean, we've looked at that number before
Yeah,
for comparison's sake and just
Yeah.
said, you know, hey, wouldn't be the same, but it would be in this ballpark, and
Right.
it's not small money.
yeah.
So, you know, I think the biggest concern on people's parts about the recycling going away, and I haven't personally witnessed this, but I don't discount the fact that it's a possibility, is will people do illegal dumping? You know, does that sort of push it to the limit of saying, I mean, there's two
They
things.
do it now.
It's
I
always
know,
been
but,
happening.
exactly,
Yeah, that's
but
the
has
reality
it,
of it. Has it increased?
has it increased
Right.
dramatically?
It's hard to tell.
I haven't seen it,
Yeah.
but that doesn't
Right.
mean it's not happening.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Right, but what will happen is once 2019 or 2020 comes around, is people will start throwing stuff in their trash, and so in a sense
Right.
they are illegal
Right.
dumping.
well, and I think they are already with
They are,
with recycling
a lot
to a
of
certain
people are.
degree.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
that's
Yeah.
probably more, it's an
Just to keep it
unseen,
simple.
we can't see it because it's in their
Right.
trash bags, but I guarantee you that there are people that maybe were recycling before that are now just
Oh, yeah.
throwing it into their
Definitely.
trash,
Definitely.
which is unfortunate.
It is unfortunate, no, and I think that, you know, it would be, you know, having townwide collection would alleviate a whole bunch of different issues, but it really is a chunk of money, so.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there's, I mean, and just to add to it perhaps is that, you know, particularly with China not buying our recyclables anymore, there's a lot of people who think that all the recycling is just going into the trash anyway.
Well,
So
and,
they're
and,
a little
and
more
and
likely
a
to
significant
do it.
portion of it
Does.
is.
Yeah, I mean, even
Yeah.
by, you know, beyond the residents, I mean,
Yes.
by some of the companies and whatnot, so.
Right, no, that's
So-
what I, yeah, no,
It's like why,
I mean, it's pretty well-known fact that that's happening
yeah, yeah,
already, so.
so it's,
Definitely heard a few horror stories.
Yeah, and how do we contribute to that? You know, does that,
it does, yeah, it doesn't,
it doesn't affect townwide collection versus people doing it personally. I guess, you know, really sort of how we look at that from a recommendation, if we were to make a recommendation, would be philosophical as to whether,
yeah.
you know, doing, because I think there would be, in my mind, it's unlikely that if we had it's likely that if we had townwide collection, it would improve the collection of trash within the town of Putney and recycling.
Yeah,
You know, is it incumbent upon us to make that decision for those who,
Right.
that's an extra tax burden on? I mean, obviously it would be up to the voters, but again, that dilemma with town meeting tending to be biased towards those who can afford is problematic. But. All right, anything else?
Nothing.
Nothing. Probably warrants then.
Okay.
I'll move to approve and execute the warrants as presented upon review.
oh, I second, I'm sorry. Lost me for a second there.
It's been moved and seconded to execute the warrants, approve and execute the warrants as presented on review. If there's no further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay.
Chris, you may not have been in town long enough yet to offer much of an opinion about it, but do you have any sense of whether illegal dumping is something that's...
I've gotten one complaint about yard trimmings up on, was it Signal Pines
Yeah.
Road? I got a complaint about that. Apparently there was a property that just was inherited by a family up there.
Yeah.
A neighbor called about illegal dumping up there. I tried to find it. I couldn't really find it or the perpetrator.
Yeah.
But other than that, that's the only call I've gotten in a couple months now.
Something to keep your eyes out for. If you see a lot of it
Okay.
on the roadsides, then you should be paying attention.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's, of course, one of the big issues is, you know, enforcement of something like that is really challenging. So. All right.
Okay, so payroll warrant dated September 21st in the amount of $8,845.38. So it's the library, highway, and office.
So who's signing checks for the school? It's Scott, so didn't they do that, or how's that all working now?
That is all with Frank Rucker and Lyle Holiday.
So they were gonna,
Yeah,
Okay.
and you bring that up too, I didn't have
I know
that
there
on
was
my,
there was a big question about that a couple days ago at the school.
no,
Yeah.
so they're taking care of that, but Putney Central School, Herb and Nancy, is it Nancy Gagnon?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
They'll be signing checks for the hot lunch program and the petty cash.
Okay.
But everything else goes through
Mhm.
the SU. So all the operating budget is Frank and Lyle.
Okay, good, that helps me. That helps me.
Yes.
So I
So
don't have to track her down all the time.
so Scott Henry, we're confident and comfortable with that decision. And Richard Cahill came to our office and talked to both of us. So,
Great. So Nancy was just put on?
yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
Payroll warrant, September 28th, in the amount of $6,403.05. And this would be on-call, fire personnel, and highway and the office.
Yeah, just out of curiosity, I guess, you know, does on-call just get put into the regular,
It's a monthly stipend
oh, I see, okay.
for emergency.
Right, no, I mean, but, so for, if it's someone who works for the town, who's
Yes.
also on call, does
Yeah.
that just get put into the,
Yeah, it goes into their, they
A
get,
different category of...
Yes.
but they cut one check together with
Yes.
two different
Yes.
invoice
Yeah.
numbers, so to speak? Okay.
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all considered payroll. it's just a different code.
Code, right.
And the direct deposit has been going well?
Yes, it has.
It seems like you have more names on it. Is that?
It fluctuates.
Mm-hmm.
It depends, because some of the library,
Mhm.
they have direct deposit.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are here. I cannot motivate the highway department to get direct deposit. They like their checks.
Yeah, go on cash.
Yeah, which is fine. It's working, it's great,
Mhm.
so. There we have.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of those things that just over time it will
Yep.
cycle.
And it sets us up for credit card payments too.
Mm-hmm.
So once we get used to that, then we can put something else into the system where, you know, people can pay online, or if it's an ACH, you know,
Automatic withdrawal.
yeah, from their account to pay taxes or utilities.
Yeah.
So I think it's gonna make it easier.
But and are they, at least the highway, are they aware that some banks will give you a deal if you do direct deposits? In other words, sometimes you don't have to pay as many service fees and things like that?
I don't know if it matters to them,
Oh, okay.
honestly, they're just, yeah, they like their checks.
I get it.
It must be a guy thing, I don't know. Accounts payable, September 17th through the 28th. $99,491.12. The excavator lease is in here.
For the
BLC,
Holland Hill thing?
no,
Oh.
For Warrant.
Oh,
Equipment.
gotcha,
Yep.
okay.
um,
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
But they had another one up there too, on Holland Hill.
Oh, yeah, big
Yeah.
one, not
Yeah.
ours. No, that was Archie's,
Okay, that makes sense.
yeah.
I thought there was one that said Putney on there.
There was, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
well, ours was probably up there.
Yeah, there
Right, no,
Yeah.
There were two of them.
but there was, right, no, there was
Right,
another
we
one,
only-
is what he was
yeah,
saying.
we only have one, yeah,
For now.
right.
No.
Don't go there, Josh.
The little one was ours, the big one was
Oh, yeah,
his.
but Brian was up there spray painting Putney.
I don't know,
On
they
the
both
big
look
one.
pretty big to me. They did. BLCT passive, there's like a $19,000 invoice in here. What else? There was a couple other big ones in there. But you'll see that.
Yeah, speaking of big excavators, when we pulled into the pit this morning, I pulled up by the big excavator.
Oh,
And, you know, my van's big, and the bucket was right in front of the van, and it's like, wow, that's a big bucket.
Yeah.
driven into it.
Not quite, but that's not a small machine.
No, it wasn't.
I'm glad we opted into oil because it's going up.
Be interesting to see how much we use. So the town garage converted to propane,
Right.
so it'll be interesting to see the difference.
That's gonna be probably, well, I mean, it'll depend on how warm they wanna be, but it's probably not gonna be a small bill for that, I wouldn't think, because we didn't fire it up last year, I don't think, did we?
No, it just got converted.
Right, so,
This year it got
right,
converted.
yeah.
And I do know that we overspent for fuel oil at the town garage.
So they were burning, I thought they were mostly burning wood, but they were burning it for,
They were
Overnight as
doing
well.
both.
yeah,
But I think at some point Wade, our insurance rep,
right.
told him, don't use it, and then we had to get it out.
The stove.
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's probably why we overspent, so. maybe,
Right.
yeah.
Will the fire department use the mini splits for heat?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Until you can't.
The only time they'll go back to the radiant is if it gets really cold
Mhm.
where the
Yeah, you can't. It's
the heat
the mini
pumps
splits won't work. Yeah.
Right.
Although they're pretty good, I mean, it just, their efficiency starts to drop off when it gets below think 13 degrees is the break point, and then that below 5 degrees, they really start to drop off pretty rapidly, but they should do well by us, but we will see that electric bill spike pretty dramatically, so
We can use our credits.
do we?
I don't know, I'm gonna have to renegotiate that, I think.
The solar.
Yeah, I mean, why not?
That's the
See whether we
attitude.
can.
No, I'm serious.
No, I'm serious too.
I
That's
see the bills and I'm like, this, man. That upsets me. So yeah, if we're gonna generate more electric and I wanna be able to utilize more.
Well, we're
credits.
gonna use more electric,
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know whether are we over-generating for what we use? I don't know. We haven't
No.
looked at that in a while.
No, we're not.
So,
So having the mini splits is a very good thing.
oh no. We're not, we use how much electricity we create currently or not?
Yeah. No, we don't, that's what I'm saying.
We're under,
Yes,
okay,
yes,
so yes, no.
We're under,
On our
so,
usage, so that,
Right.
upping our usage of that will
yes,
improve that situation.
Yes.
Right.
What's a water hog? 4x16 mat? What is that?
who's the
I'm
vendor?
thinking it's I think it's a pickup for a, I'm guessing it's a pickup for a pump system.
It might be what they're using up at Holland Hill.
It's
Then
for
they have
Swish
to.
White River.
Oh, by Swish. Oh, that something in a building then, wouldn't it?
I don't know, we'll find out.
Right here.
So like a big sump pump type deal.
That's,
Fire department.
it's an attachment, yeah, I think it's a. I think it's basically a head on a pump, is my sense, but.
By 16.
And are we gonna have an executive session?
We are,
Okay,
and you will have to make a decision.
we don't have any other business. Great. I don't think, do we have any other business?
No?
Okay.
That's all Karen's.
So, in that case, I would entertain a motion to enter executive session under Title I VSA 313, after making a specific finding that premature general public knowledge would clearly place the public body or a person involved at a substantial disadvantage to discuss pending or probable civil litigation or a prosecution to which the public body is or may be party.
So moved.
And seconded.
Unless there's any further discussion, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Oh, we'll invite Karen.
And we'll invite Karen. Yes. And we will be making a decision.
Yes.
So we will exit and take action, so we can either inform you of that or, is this gonna be a long?
I
You'll
don't
come
think
back.
so, no.
So we have exited executive session at 7:05 and
Yep, and we move to accept the settlement agreement between Eric McGowan and the town of Putney based on the lister's recommendation.
Seconded.
I would just add a value in that.
Oh,
So,
yes.
to change the value of the McGowan property from,
326,800
to,
285,000.
all right,
The difference.
so
Yep.
it's been moved to accept the settlement agreement between the town of Putney and Eric McGowan for change in assessed value from $326,800 to $285,000 as per recommended by the listers. If there's no further discussion, then All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Let's see, well, next meeting. Next meeting date, October 10th. Sound right?
Good.
Okay. Till then, thank you.
Thank you.